history of rock and roll is full of great records that went pretty much unnoticed when they were originally released, but became cult favorites years later when they were rediscovered by music enthusiasts. This album, called Introspection, is one of those records. The End were a British group that was managed and produced by Stones bassist Bill Wyman and legendary sound engineer Glyn Johns. And this record is one of the most criminally underrated British psychedelic albums of the 60s. In this video, we're going to explore the history of the band, and we will revisit this psychedelic gem called Introspection. Let's begin. After the success of Satisfaction in 1965, the Rolling Stones became one of the most popular bands in the world, second only to the Beatles, and Bill Wyman became interested in producing and managing new and up-and-coming bands. One of the first bands he produced was a group called The Preachers, which featured a 14-year-old Peter Frampton as their lead singer. The group also featured drummer Tony Newman, who had played in Wyman's first band and who had also played drums for the Stones in the very early days of the group. The single was released in August 1965.
But I love you. If you love me, if you love me too. Tell me, baby, what can I do?
Between 1965 and 1967, Wyman also produced singles by bands such as Moon's Train and Hamilton and the Movement. But the band that seemed to be the focus of his interest as a producer and manager was a group called The End. The End were a mod group that had toured with the Stones in 1965. In an interview several years later, lead singer Colin Griffin recalled,
"We'd done a couple of tours with the Stones, and we had got on well with them, especially with Bill and Charlie. We got to know Bill fairly well during the course of those two tours, and Bill was looking to extend his interests into production and management, so it seemed to be a good fit. At the time, we were very influenced by the stuff that was coming out of Stax and Atlantic. We wanted a manager who would understand, and who wasn't one of the traditional suits."
The group's first single was released in October 1965.
What I want you to do, I can't get any joy. I can't get any joy.
A few months later, in early 1966, Bill Wyman decided to start a production company called Freeway Music with sound engineer Glyn Johns. Glyn Johns had worked with the Stones since the very early days of the group, and at that point, Johns was already well known as one of the best sound engineers in Britain. Apart from his work with the Stones, Johns had also worked as a sound engineer on huge records from that period such as You Really Got Me by the Kinks and My Generation by The Who. Glyn Johns recalled,
"Bill Wyman and I formed a company." It's a very loose term for what we were doing. But anyway, we had this band called The End, very aptly named. So The End, we couldn't get them arrested in England, so one of them knew somebody in Spain, some woman who knew these two brothers who owned this massive company in Spain called Sonoplay, and they owned billboards and they were a publishing outfit, very wealthy, and they decided that they wanted to go into music. It's a bit of a long story, this, sorry.
The woman Glyn is talking about was Sandra Lebrock, a British actress and choreographer who married the owner of the Sonoplay record label, Adolfo Weitzman. Sandra Lebrock appeared on several Spanish films in the 60s and even recorded several singles there. One of the members of The End knew Sandra Lebrock because they grew up in the same neighbourhood in London.
So I'm told to go to Spain and meet with these guys to sell The End's record, right? Because apparently they're interested. So I jump on a plane and I go over there and play them the record, and they're very pleased. And obviously part of the deal was that Bill Wyman from the Rolling Stones would go over and help promotion. Because the Stones had never actually been to Spain.
The meeting with Sonoplay must have been quite surreal, because both The End and Glyn Johns himself got a recording deal with the label. Glyn Johns remembered,
I'd cut the song Lady Jane with the Rolling Stones, and I cut it as a single myself with a string quartet, and Brian Jones played sitar, and John Mark played acoustic Spanish guitar. It was really good. It's a great little arrangement done by Tony Meehan, who was in the Shadows. So I had an acetate of it, and I had it in my briefcase. So as I'm leaving the meeting with the guys from Sonoplay, the guy says to me, "Have you got anything else?" And I've got my little briefcase. And I thought, oh. So I pulled out the acetate of my version of Lady Jane, and I give it to him. I didn't say it was me. And I said, well, I've got this. So he put it on. He said, oh, this is great. We love this. So I then had to own up it was me. And they asked me to sign a contract there and then. And I signed my name, Glyn T. Johns. My middle initial is T. So when the record came out, I was called Glyn Johns. And we carry on. And a few weeks later, The End go to Spain. And they start touring to promote their record. And then Bill and I jump on a plane and go out. So we pull up at Madrid airport, and it's complete lunacy. I mean, it's Bill's coming in, one of the Rolling Stones. So there's about 50 cameramen, TV, we have movies, kids on the roof screaming and all the usual stuff. So I get out of the way, I get off the plane first, and I walk down under the wing to get out of the way, and Bill follows me down. And the whole press corps follow me under the bloody wing. So the guy from the record company, I can see him at the back of the crowd. I go, wait, tell this lot they're taking... I've had long hair, you know. So they're taking pictures of the wrong place. Bill's coming down the bloody stairs now. He goes, no, your record's #1. It had been... Seriously, I swear. I mean, I had no idea it had even been released.
For a brief period of time, Glyn Johns became a big star, appearing on the cover of music magazines, and even appearing on Spanish television promoting the song.
My dear Lady Anne.
After signing to Sonoplay, The End moved to Spain in late 1966. The group caused a big sensation in clubs around the Madrid area, and they became part of the Madrid music scene. The group was accompanied by 2 girls who sang backing vocals and danced on stage. And the fact that they were managed by a member of the Rolling Stones also helped them get a lot of publicity and hype. Their first single with Sonoplay was released in late 1966.
Too much of anything ain't good for nobody. You better believe it, baby.
The single got a fair amount of radio play, and the group started touring all over the country, achieving great success in cities such as Valencia and Barcelona. Their second single with Sonoplay was released in March 1967. Both sides of the single were written by band members Dave Brown and Colin Griffin. The End also frequently played in American military bases. And that's where the group got their first taste of the psychedelic sounds that were starting to bloom in the West Coast. The group's following single was a cover of Morning Dew by Bonnie Dobson and Tim Rose, which saw the band moving away from the usual soul material towards a slightly more lysergic type of sound. Times were changing, and just like many bands from that period, their music started shifting towards psychedelia. In late 1967, the group released their final single for Sonoplay. The A-side was a gorgeous psychedelic song called Loving Sacred Loving. The song featured Nicky Hopkins on harpsichord. After the release of the single, guitarist Terry Taylor joined the band. Terry Taylor was a member of The Mode, another British band who had moved to Spain after signing to Sonoplay. At this point, The End had fully embraced psychedelia, and the band left Madrid and moved back to Britain, where they recorded their psychedelic masterpiece Introspection. The group got signed to Decca and released the song Shades of Orange as a single in March 1968. The song featured Charlie Watts playing tablas. Lead singer Colin Griffin recalled,
I suppose Shades of Orange was kind of a transitional piece, still retaining what we had been doing for some time in terms of the soul influence, but starting to head towards what became the more psychedelic stuff. When you look at it in retrospect, you can see how it was kind of a bridge between what we were doing before and what came when we got deeply into introspection.
The B-side was Loving Sacred Loving, which had already been released as an A-side in Spain. The recording sessions for the group's first and only album took place at Decca Record Studio and at Olympic Studio. Colin Griffin recalled,
"We were doing a lot of recording, and we would go off to Spain where we were quite popular, and we would write a bunch of songs and come back and record them. And we gradually built up a body of recorded material which became the Introspection sessions. We recorded those over a period of time, some at Decca Record Studio in West Hampstead, where Gus Dudgeon was the house engineer. And then we were also recording at Olympic Studio with Glyn Johns engineering. Bill Wyman and Glyn Johns were both musos and performers, so there was a common language and approach. I think we would rehearse the stuff pretty thoroughly before going into the studio, and then perform it for Bill and Glyn to listen and make comments and suggestions. As producer, Bill was final arbiter, but I don't recall any great divide between him and us, and I don't recall any real arguments or tensions."
The first track on the album is Dream World, an excellent song with an exquisite lysergic melody. Despite the fact that the band was already fully immersed in psychedelic melodies and sounds, the song still retains the sort of soul-influenced grooves that dominated their earlier material. The second track, a song called Under the Rainbow, is one of the highlights of the album. The song starts with a mysterious-sounding riff accompanied by great hypnotic vocals by Colin Griffin.
Under the rainbow, someone is hiding.
Certain parts of the song are also reminiscent of the vocal harmonies from Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys.
Everyone's been there, no one has seen that.
And one of the highlights of the song is the excellent guitar break by Terry Taylor. The band sounds on top of their game, and the production is excellent. As stated at the beginning of the video, this is one of the best-sounding psychedelic albums from that era. The third track is Shades of Orange, which had already been released as a single in March 1968. The fourth track is a 14-second spoken interlude by a gentleman called George Kensett, who was Bill Wyman's gardener.
There's only the blue bottle over the top. He's kicking me ribs in. Hey, come on.
The record features a couple more interludes by the gardener. Bill Wyman recalled,
"George was my gardener, but he had worked with my father on building sites for years. He was a mate of my dad's from Sydenham, and we took him into the studio for a laugh because he was a wealth of amazing and hilarious stories. We took him up to Decca Studios in West Hampstead one night and got him to tell his life story in about an hour. We thought it would be fun to use a couple of clips from that tape between the tracks on the album."
The following track is another highlight from the album. Cardboard Watch is psychedelic pop at its best, with a gorgeous melody and a delicious mellotron that embellishes the track.
I'm upside down, my world is going round and round.
Later in 1969, the song was featured in a Spanish film, where the end can be seen miming to the song while walking the streets of Madrid.
Playing games in the park at midnight, trees of yellow and grass of off-white.
The last song from the A-side of the album is the title track. The song, with its intricate harmonies and brilliant Hammond organ, also features a strong soul-based groove that recalls the band's earlier material. The B-side of the album starts with another brilliant psychedelic song with a melody to die for.
Yesterday I was a child running through my mind like a game.
Once again, the excellent production work by Bill Wyman and Glyn Johns is in full display here.
What do you think now?
The following track is another 15-second spoken interlude by Bill's Gardener. And the spoken interlude is followed by another excellent track called Don't Take Me.
Don't tell me what you've heard. Don't tell me.
Once again, the group's knack for exquisite lysergic melodies is evident here.
Don't you realize what you are doing to me?
And the group's performance and musicianship is top-notch. The following track is Loving Sacred Loving, which had already been released as a Spanish single in late 1967. One of the most unusual songs from the B-side of the album is this rather jazzy version of She Said Yeah, an R&B classic which had been covered in the mid-60s by bands like the Stones and the Animals.
She said, yeah, 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 yeah. Come on, baby, I wanna make love to you too.
The song features Ken Lehman playing sax towards the end of the track. The following song is another spoken interlude by George Kensett.
And the whole lot come down the chimney, and I said, has it come through, Bill? He said, yes, come down and see what mess it's made.
And the last track is Introspection Part 2, a strong instrumental jam which serves as a continuation of the title track. The band lets loose, and guitarist Terry Taylor is in charge here, providing excellent guitar licks while the band keeps grooving like a motherfucker. After the recording sessions, The End kept touring Spain and Britain while waiting for the release of the album. But unfortunately, due to the Stones' struggles with Alan Klein, the album's release was delayed, and it ended up seeing the light of the day in November 1969, more than a year after the album was recorded. At that point in late 1969, the group's brand of psychedelia was already deemed outdated, and the record was a big commercial failure. The End went through a few lineup changes, and ended up morphing into Tucky Buzzard, who released several albums in the 70s. Colin Griffin said,
I think if Introspection had been released a year earlier, it may have made an impact, and I wonder if the band would have fallen apart when it did. As it happens, I think we had our moment.
Bill Wyman said,
I think they could have achieved a lot more, especially as the songwriting was so strong. That's usually the failing of most bands, that they've got good players and good singers, but they don't have good material. The End had the material and they could play and sing. It's nice that a lot of people now regard Introspection very highly. I think it's justified. And after all these years, I'm still very proud of the record.
Original pressings of Introspection have become truly expensive collector's items, exchanging hands on eBay or Discogs for thousands of pounds. But thankfully, the record has been reissued several times over the years, and thanks to those reissues, the album has become a cult favourite among enthusiasts of British psychedelia from the 60s, and rightfully so. If you're into 60s psychedelia, this album is essential.